Hello, Sublation Media viewers. It's I, Douglas Lain, author of Bash Bash Revolution and head of Sublation Media. With me today is...
Hello, I'm Susanna Kleeman. I'm a novelist, and I'm also the author of the upcoming Fatal Dating Tips, soon to come from Sublation Media.
Yes, and Susanna Kleeman is filling in for Ashley Frawley, who is still unwell. I am feeling much better. My nose is dry. I am not sneezing. I'm all better. I do not have COVID. But welcome to the Sublation Magazine show.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military bases and chemical plants may be advised to evacuate.
All right, Susanna. So this week's Sublation Magazine show is going to be a bit different. We're not covering the news, but instead, because I watched a movie on New Year's Eve called Booksmart, which made me feel like I was really catching up with the culture. I'm watching a movie about teenagers, and it's not from 1985, but it's...
I'm surprised because it's been out for a while, and I have seen Booksmart about 5 years ago or something.
Well, now I know. Then I realized after the fact that catching up to the culture meant watching a movie that had been made less than a decade ago. It was like it was half a decade ago. But nonetheless, we're going to be talking about Booksmart and the movie Hustlers, both of which are 5 years old. But the aim is to discuss the way in which gender and sexuality has maybe been altered, maybe it's changing in the 21st century. But I guess can I start? Should I start describing
Why don't you start?
Okay, so what I thought we know. Well, there's one scene in this movie Booksmart, and Booksmart is about a couple of teenage girls. Both of them are overachievers, or kind of the gifted and talented program type girls. They're headed for the Ivy League. It's their final day in high school. They're seniors, and it is the story of their decision to try to have an adventure before graduation. And there's a scene in the movie where one of the girls is in the all gender bathroom and overhears her fellow students, her peers discussing her, and they talk about whether or not they think she is sexually attractive, whether they'd want to do her, what they think of her, and they all agree that this character is kind of plump. She's not conventionally beautiful, but they all agree that she's quite sexy. But her personality leaves a lot to be desired because she's so driven and focused on academic success to the exclusion of all else. So she doesn't know how to have fun. And she takes this to heart. And this is why this sets off the story of them trying to have an adventure on the final night of high school. But what I noticed about this was that it was taking place in an all-gender bathroom, meaning boys and girls hanging around the urinals together. One of them is drawing a penis on the wall, on the tiles, and they're kind of crudely discussing this girl. But there's something oddly asexual about everyone. Maybe because maybe I'm projecting that because they were in an all-gender bathroom, but it just seemed very odd to me. Like it seemed futuristic and bizarre. My son Noah, who's 19, was there, and he says, no, Dad, that's true. There are all-gender bathrooms in high schools now, and yes, I have gone into an all-gender bathroom where girls and boys are together
drawing.
Well, I don't know about drawing penises, but this does occur, and so I felt strangely behind the times. But despite the fact that the movie itself was really conventional, it could have taken place 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, could have been a very similar movie. Only I think the genders would have been reversed.
That's right, because really what Booksmart is about subjecthood, isn't it? Because all those films, because in fact, what Booksmart is an echo back to the fantastic film Superbad, which I think one of the lead actors in Superbad, Jonah Hill, it's his sister who's the lead that you were talking about there in Booksmart, and we've seen plenty of those high school movies where young men, very much subjects, are going off to express their subjecthood on a quest. And we've all, over the years, enjoyed those films, but we've also come to feel that those films are very limited because the women in them really are objects and really are just there for the pleasure of the men. They don't get the good lines. It's not exactly the same. Yeah, in Superbad, some of the girls do, but it's not exactly the same. And so what this is ostensibly doing is remedying that bad state, giving the women agency, making them subjects. And we could say in that in fact what it's doing therefore is also the big work of the Enlightenment, which is to say that the realized goal of us all is subjecthood, divested from our terrible condition as objects, those of us who were designated objects in a pre-Enlightenment age. And the slow evolution of the Enlightenment is that we've all become subjects. And in becoming subjects, we all become avid agents out to pursue. However, the problem is that runs into complexities when it comes to what sexually attracts us, because that in a way presupposes that the emancipation, for example, of women should all be about becoming subjects, no longer being the passive recipient of male attention, but in fact being go-getting, active, one could say sort of consumers, active subjects who go out, choose, select. If they want a boy, if they want a girl, they at last are free to be the people who go and choose. But it's not altogether clear, Doug, that being the one who chooses, being the subject, is the be-all and end-all of everything. There is very possible to argue that being the subject is a slightly ridiculous state and situation to be in. And we could also very much say that it sort of belies something about, if we're going to talk about old-fashioned things, just physical body differences between different sexes, if that's because we could say that if you have a male body, a conventionally male body, you've got a very obvious sexuality, you've got a very obvious erection, one could say, and a lot of it is about the expunging of the erection, which lends itself very well to a story of questing, going after something, a clear trajectory, a final destination. But as people with female bodies might have a different experience of what sexuality is about, which might not be so very actively about the quest for one particular orgasm from one particular aspect of your body. Sorry, we've gone into this, full into the deep end. Happy New Year and all of that to you.
Oh yeah, Happy New Year. Yeah.
I also want to say, but the idea that for us all to be emancipated and free agents means us all becoming subjects, and us all therefore to a certain extent embodying a male-bodied sexuality, would seem to me to deny a lot of what it is as a person who spent my life inside a conventionally female body. That's not necessarily what my experience of sexuality is. A more diffuse experience of sexuality might be what I'm more familiar with, which is less about becoming a subject, going off, selecting, choosing, going and getting this one, going and getting that one, and more about, let's be frank, a pleasure and a power in being a recipient.
I had a different take. I think I thought of the movie Starship Troopers and the co-ed shower scene in that movie when I watched this scene in the all-gender bathroom. And rather than thinking that everyone in the movie had been made masculine, I thought they had all been neutered. They in Starship Troopers, the point of the co-ed bathroom scene or the shower scene was to demonstrate that the characters did not have libidos, but were fully enmeshed in a fascist state. So they weren't driven as individuals and therefore could co-occupy the same shower without distraction or embarrassment. And I feel like something similar is going on in the all gender bathroom scene, where the guy is drawing a penis, but there's nothing phallic about the situation. And you would think that kind of locker room behavior wouldn't be something he would do in front of the attractive cheerleader who's also in the bathroom with him. Nor would, if you know that it's a co-ed space, would you speak so freely in such a derogatory way about a girl in the school who may be in the room, or one of her friends might be. You would just think that it would, in a world where there were libidos and where you had to navigate the interests of one another, where everything wasn't flattened out, you wouldn't behave in such a way in the all gender bathroom. I don't think. I mean, I'm being an old man shouting at this.
I should say we're talking about films, so that doesn't mean that this is how things. I'm glad that you checked in with your son. My kids are too young to be able to convey to me whether or not this is how things are these days. We're talking about films, so who knows if this is how people.
It was 5 years ago too. Like, we're a half decade behind. Who knows what's going on in those?
Well, but I should say, I think that people very much are guided by what they see in films, and I think if people are, I would have thought something like Booksmart is going to be influential and feed back into what people do. I would also say that everything is a joke and a meme these days, and nothing has drawing penises on walls might have been very shocking back in the day when you and I were in school or high school, depending on what country you're in. But these days, everybody sees everything from a very early age, and none of it means anything because it's just a lot of sarcastic stuff poured on top of each other with some frog memes on top of it, etc., etc. Things have lost their shock value to begin with. As you know, I'm a fan of Jean Baudrillard, and I'm just his handmaiden here to explain sort of things that I've learned from reading about what he says. That's my fig leaf, so that I don't have to commit to anything that I'm actually saying. But what he would say is that everything's become obscene, and by obscene, he doesn't mean sexually obscene at all. He means the habit that we've been in since the Enlightenment, but really brought to fruition by the computer revolution, is a habit of harvesting data, and the belief that once you've translated everything into data, then everything can be controlled, remedied, made better. And the act of thinking you can translate the world into data is what he calls obscene. And so what he would say is, by bringing everything into computers, you have to see everything. So when you bring drawings of penises, even pornography, data about plane crashes, when you bring it all into the computer so that you can see everything and nothing's hidden anymore. And we can confuse that with liberation. We can very much confuse it and think, well, in the past, things were hidden and taboo. We weren't allowed to see this. We weren't allowed to say that. It belonged on the top shelf. Now we live in a liberated age where everything is visible. But just because everything is visible doesn't mean that we're free people within it. In a way, what it just means is everything has been translated down into some metadata that makes us more taggable, more sellable to by corporations, more controllable by the government as we identify ourselves. And so the action of showing everything is the state that we're in. And it's a deeply unsexy one, because what used to be sexy, and here I'm talking about heterosexuality, and I just want to be very clear, heterosexuality is just a myth and a fantasy, and I hope that we're going to discuss that. But nevertheless, it was one that had some frisson, and perhaps what you're alluding to is these open bathrooms, these places where everybody's showing nads a go-go. It's not a very, even if it might be more real, even if it might be more about the base reality of, in fact, heterosexuality is a myth, all that stuff is nonsense. Nevertheless, perhaps it was a more erotic, sexy myth than everybody splaying all their parts out and doing poos in front of each other. Who knows how any of this is going to actually end up.
Apparently in real life there aren't urinals in these all gender bathrooms.
In all gender bathrooms there are no urinals.
That's what I have heard. And
what's the first no gender bathroom that you can remember seeing on TV? Because I know what it was.
Oh, I can't recall seeing one on TV before. Maybe this is my first. I've seen them in airports. I've seen them in public spaces, but I always assumed there was just one stall behind the door. You
Ally
know?
McBeal. Do you ever watch Ally McBeal? Are you girly enough to have
No,
watched Ally McBeal?
no, I'm a man, so I
With
have not seen
Callista
that show.
Flockhart. Had very lovely Callista Flockhart in it. So that was a long time ago. That was maybe 15 years ago, or maybe even more, maybe 20 years ago. They had a unisex bathroom there. And lawyers. That's the first, and that was a big deal. I remember that. It's quite strange. It seems very early on that happened. Anyway, they had urinals in there. They had urinals, and they also had non-urinals. So that's why I'm.
Well, but I just can't imagine. I mean, it's difficult enough to go into a public bathroom where there are urinals and navigate the space when there are other men in there. You know, there's all sorts of etiquette about it. You don't, if there's a wall of urinals, you don't go next to, if and one man's there, you don't go right up next to him to pee. You know, you go to further, as far away as you can on the
Really?
wall.
It depends
Oh
what
yeah.
you're after, surely.
Hmm?
It depends what you're after.
No, it doesn't depend on anything. That is the unwritten rule, and it stands. Just like
Depends. Surely it depends.
people break the rules, I suppose. But I mean, yeah, I don't know about hookup culture in the men's room, but I thought that was all about the stalls. I didn't think it was about the urinals. But in any case, my point is, I would find myself inhibited if I thought that perhaps at any moment, especially as a teenager, some girl I might like would walk into while I was, making water. I wouldn't like that idea. But in any case,
is that how you call it in the States?
No, that's how I called it now, just to be particularly prudish. So yeah, but okay, back to overall though, to kind of talk about the movie. One of the things that I thought was that the characters, likable, and I thought their relationship with each other was sort of believable, and the movie easily enough kind of got me into the mode where I was identifying with them, I was rooting for them, I was happy for them when things went well. I could even almost buy into the kind of melancholy at the end as they parted ways and things like that. But the MacGuffin of the film, the purpose of the film, what drove it through all of its paces, was really contrived and artificial. She finds out, the go-getter, lean-in feminist, overachiever, finds out that other people in her school who she thought were losers and layabouts and lazy and headed nowhere had all also gotten into an Ivy League school.
Yeah, it's a really good moment. I really like that. That's really
and now she feels that she is compelled to compete with them. I guess maybe this is somewhat believable in the terrain of having fun. She's going to have it all, damn it, before school's over. But how do you have fun? Would you really? I just feel like in reality, this character would have not been drawn to the party scenes, and certainly not in the same way that they were. Also, the fact that there's some funny scenes where one of the characters in the buddy picture there, they're two buddies, two girls who are best friends. One of them is a lesbian and the other one is heterosexual, but the parents of the lesbian girl believe that they're a couple, and that's played off for laughs in a pretty good way. But overall, I just thought that it was the drive to go out basically to get laid didn't strike me as realistic somehow.
it doesn't strike me as realistic either. But then on the other hand, we're old, Doug, and maybe that's how it is for the young women. But it didn't strike me as realistic. What it struck me is, well, it's always been men who've been doing this, and now it's our turn to do this. And therefore, what it seems to say is, there's one way, and then men have always done it, and now women can do that one way too. But I'm not convinced there's only one way. I think there's a lot of different ways, and I don't think it is real. I think it's not the way to have fun and pleasure as a woman, to go out and pursue men like that. When I was younger and more foolish, I've gone out and pursued men. It's never ended very well for me. And it's not because you can pursue men without being, anyway. I don't think that just swapping out the body parts but exhibiting the same behavior is real, helpful, or how things actually work. Because I think that things are not similarly different. Oh, she's got tits, but she still goes out and gets men. Oh, he's got a penis, but he goes out and gets women. I think that things are more different than that. And I think that the culture that tries to say that, look, you're all similarly shaped bit ice cubes in a tray of different colors is a very oppressive culture. And I think that that is what Baudrillard meant when he talked about the Matrix. In fact, that's exactly what he meant, which is the idea that we're all free to be different, but we have to live within the grid that is imposed on us. And our differences are all similarly shaped so that we can be controllably different rather than being asymmetrically different, i.e. to say, no, I don't want to be in this grid at all in the first place. And I think that things like sexuality, libido, I have not read enough Freud to be able to talk properly about libido. I sense you know more about libido than I do, Doug. So I'm going to eschew that word if that's okay. But what
as a Baudrillarian, you, of course, you don't want to talk about libido. That's verboten. There is no such thing.
Well, you know, I'm just going to eschew that word. But what I'm going to say is that I think that things like sexuality are dangerous forces because they don't fit nicely into matrices, and they can cause people to behave badly. They can also cause people to dip out of visible structures where everybody is being obscene, not in the rude sense, but the sense of showing everything, sharing everything, living in one sphere, which often is the internet for us now, where we're all very transparent and we're supposedly being very honest about what we're doing. The true force of things like really having a crush on someone is you want to take that person and disappear. You want to leave that place. And we're not encouraged to leave that place very much because that's a safe place for us. And it's a place where we can be ordered, mollified, observed, tracked, imprisoned in the prison that is the internet. So, you know, let's be clear, the internet is really a prison where we're all being observed, tracked at all times, and Lord knows what's going to happen to us in the future. And not just sexuality, but sexuality is one of the things that is dangerous to that because it says, well, let's switch the lights off and go somewhere else. And I don't by no means believe that this is all plotted out in dark rooms by machines. You know, Elon Musk or
I think it is. I think this is a big conspiracy, but go ahead.
But I think that we are more controllable when we're taught that mad passion or you know, overwhelming feelings of sexual interest in somebody or the desire to switch off the lights of the internet and go somewhere else is no longer something that we need so much. And the obscenity of the age we live in, where you can just see penises all the time, if that's what you're interested in, dulls out what those things are. And I think it's worth talking about and understanding the danger of what that is. As I said to you before, it's not called stepping out with someone for nothing. It used to be, you know, you step out with someone because you leave the world. And everything now encourages us to stay in the world, to stay in one persona, in one world, which is online, really, where we exhibit ourselves, say who we are, and make ourselves attempt to be very consistent there, to say we're just one thing, living in this one place. These are our tags. If we deviate from that, people will do the screenshots from 3 months back where we said something different. The possibility of not being consistent is a moral horror, it would seem. And anything that's about there being the possibility of what Baudrillard calls reversibility, which is basically throwing all the pieces in the air and saying, actually, no, something else, go away. That's a dangerous force that is not encouraged to us.
Well, one thing that I think that I don't think I entirely disagree with you, but I think you have a slightly different angle. One of the things that I noticed about this movie, and I've noticed it about a number of other movies that I've seen lately that are contemporary movies. I saw the movie The Killer, I think it was called, which is just about an assassin who ends up having to leave his profession and because something goes wrong and on one of his jobs, and it's and I had seen The Day of the Jackal.
The old one recently, or the new one?
Yeah, the old one.
That's a good film.
It's a very good film. And I saw the new Top Gun movie. It's not so new now. A little while ago, maybe a year ago. And I watched one of the Avengers movies. I'd seen one of them before, and I watched Endgame. I guess I was supposed to watch Infinity War first, but I watched Endgame.
I've never seen them, I've got to say.
And all in all of these films, I mean, it's certainly understandable and excusable in the Avengers movies, but in all of these films, it seemed to me that the world has disappeared. That like if you were to compare this movie Booksmart with let's say a movie like Say Anything from the 80s, or Dazed and Confused, which is a little different because it's a nostalgia picture, or American Graffiti, which again is kind of I'm kind of putting my thumb on the scale by picking those two. Nonetheless, that there is a sense of the time and the place and the reality of the world in Say Anything that is really missing from Booksmart. I mean, in Booksmart, all the characters are headed for Ivy League schools. They're all fashionable and beautiful by today's standards. And their primary problems are simply, I guess, reaching their goals, and while at the same time enjoying their life enough. So they're under this injunction to enjoy. You know, why aren't you having more fun? But in Say Anything, there's a class divide. There's people who have suffered real heartbreak. There's certainly a big difference between, and it's emphasized and discussed, the difference between men and women is a part of the movie, and the conflict and animosity between the sexes.
They're all hyperreal. They're all hyperreal. They're all they could all be pop videos. They all owe their roots to the sort of refined.
You mean like Maverick and all the ones where the world is dropped away are hyperreal? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I mean. And I think that Booksmart is the same. And if for something to be hyperreal, doesn't just have to be that it's got a lot of special effects. It also has to be that it has been shorn of certain reality, and it's been, certain features have been augmented and everything else has been excluded. And we don't mind because, and that's even also in terms of the plot. I mean, for example, something that I think is a lot like that, is Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. So I don't know if you've seen those shows, and I love those shows. They're totally hyperreal, though. Also, that the plotting is hyperreal there. I'm using that as an example to say that it's not just about the sheen of it. It's also about the plotting. It's about when you're not looking for the messy grain of what our actual life feels like. What Baudrillard might call the desert of the real. And instead, it's this heightened, extra, more enjoyable, better. The plots are madcap, incredible, very ornate. But in the end, those things are cold because they cannot really talk to our confused, messy souls, because they're all about simplifying everything, aren't they? And they all look like, so something like Booksmart and those films, what they feel like to me are what Hollywood musicals used to feel like, right? Which is sort of the antecedents of music videos. Heightened reality, wonderful moments, very stylized. But we used to have those, and we used to have a lot of other films also that were grittier, messier, ended up in different places. But now we only have Hollywood musicals, but all the music is gone, or rather the music is heavy laden into the soundtrack. It often matters more than anything else, and is so very powerful and able to guide us and give us the emotion through the music that the dialogue, certainly, and the interaction between the people is not giving us. The music supplies in a fake way. And we're swept along. And it is strange, isn't it? It used to be, it was a bit that films were like this, and now they're all like this. Even the ones that aren't Avengers films, they're all like this. They're all played for jokes, basically. They're all highly stylized plays for jokes, sometimes with visual effects, and sometimes just with plot machinations, or
I want to, okay, so I wanted to, before we move on to talk about Hustlers, which is another movie that you suggested that we watch and to compare with this one. The other thing I want to say about this is that I feel as though by getting rid of the world, by getting rid of the difficulties that we kind of still experience in the world, by taking it outside of any historical moment and making it more about the genre of movie rather than about trying to represent the times or the past in a film. Like in a movie like The Killer, the very same character as from the Day of the Jackal is shown going through the steps of his craft, but because he's shorn of the world that would support such a character, which is the world of international intrigue and colonial power in the Day of the Jackal, in this world, it's just there's no explanation for why this would ever exist, except for I guess there's a hint at the inequality between people, because there is a billionaire class that can afford to hire this guy to do corporate intrigue, but it just doesn't have any political or historical basis. So there's also a sense in which there's no way out. The killer isn't making a choice and hasn't created himself into this character, but rather he's just sort of organically arisen within the genre, I guess. It just there's no possibility for him to change. And I feel that I just watched a high school movie where the characters already know in advance what their lives are going to be and aren't afraid of what their future is going to hold. There's no sense that they're facing change. And whereas, if you watch, so anyway, so I feel as though again, this is from 5 years ago. This is maybe not how things are now, but I felt like 5 years ago, it seemed to me that film presented the world as somewhat static, frozen. And part of the way that was done was by decontextualizing it or taking the history of it out.
Yes, I think that is true, and making things into set pieces. But of course, it's the biggest illusion of all. Absolutely, the only thing that is constant is change, and it is such a myth that change is not possible, and it's such a very seductive and attractive myth, and we can get so hypnotized and lulled by it, and it's just the biggest pile of old cobblers. It's absolutely not true at all. We're absolute fools if we think that things are static and are not going to change. Things are only going to change. Doesn't mean that they're going to change for the better. It probably means that they're going to change for the worse. But we are sort of, that's what being hypnotized by unreal things does to us. It's looking endlessly onto the screens that we spend our time in and feeling lulled by them and being just in an endless scrolling fog. But just because we're in an endless scrolling fog of beautiful images that have been purveyed to us and are not real images, that are better than real images, that make us not want to go into the real world, because the images that we see in the real world will not be as nice and they won't be as available to us. Just because we are sucking on the teat of that experience does not mean that things are not changing all over the world in all sorts of ways, even if we're being hypnotized by the thought that things don't change. So, I watch Sublation YouTube very often. Often there has been and is talk of, things don't change, nothing changes. But I always, whenever I hear that, I feel, I just want to say that's just so wrong. Everything changes all the time. If we're caught up in a loop of looking at things all the time on screens, that doesn't mean that things are not endlessly always changing. I don't believe at all that we're in a form of stasis. That may be what's useful for us to be told and to be ingested. And even things like capitalist realism, I think that's such a sort of teddy bear in the end that you can cling on to and hold to and think, oh, this is just this is how we all misery
what words say your words, Susanna, don't just what do you mean? I'm getting defensive here when you go after the concept of capitalist realism, not so much because I want to defend Mark Fisher's idea, but just
because
the whole thing about there being
really
a world.
I think it's really self-defeating. I think it's an interesting, it's a brilliant book. It's an interesting thing to absorb and think about and to see. But I think also it just gives permission for you to just sit and pick your nose and look at Instagram, or sorry, TikTok. I show my age by even saying Instagram there. I think
Instagram still exists, but yes, but look, capitalist realism, putting aside Mark Fisher's particular use of the term, or in his book, if we just think of if we say capitalist realism instead of hyperreality, then at least there is an economic foundation behind the stasis we can see it as an ideology rather than a fact. I mean, one of the problems I have with Baudrillard is that he ontologizes what I take to be an ideological moment, saying, "Oh yeah, the real is gone. We are trapped. All there is are images now, and there's no recourse to history. History is ended."
That's not what he says at all. It's really not what he says at all. He's written a book called Fatal Strategies that tells you how to mess up the system and do other things. That's really not what he says at all. I don't mean to imply that perhaps you haven't read the entire works of Baudrillard.
I have not read the entire works of Baudrillard.
I have to say, what you're saying there is what people who maybe haven't read very much Baudrillard but have heard about him say. And
I've read, for an example, I've read the Gulf War isn't happening, or it will not happen, did not happen. Those are 3 essays. I've read them, and they were all about how the reality of history, the history had ended, that we no longer have the capacity to create historical moments. So one exception to that, I guess, was when for him in his lifetime was 9/11, which he thought might be
yes. He is he is somebody who talks often in hyperbole, and that is a strategy and technique that he uses. He will say things provocatively in order to force a reaction out of you, and I understand that that's not polite behavior from theorists. I understand that what you want is people to speak clearly their mind in a logical way, blah blah blah. But he says that itself is a debauched project, and theory itself has become hyperreal, and that whenever you're being obscene, which means saying, well, it's the truth because it's mathematically logical and I can see it as data on the computer, anything that's part of that project to him is deeply suspicious. So he does write things as a provocateur. He said himself he's a provocateur. That is not to everybody's taste, but nevertheless, and another thing that's not to everybody's taste is that sometimes what he does is what one might call, and I know my toes curl, thought fiction. Ideas about things that may or may not be true. Ooh, horror, shock. But at least somebody's doing it. And at least when you do that, you liberate yourself a bit, because you're free to have big, crazy ideas. You don't have to endlessly justify how it's logically true all the way, blah, 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 in a very small micro way that stops you from being able to have the biggest theories possible. Sometimes it's good just time to shoot the breeze in the biggest way possible. And in his books about how the Gulf War, his essays about the Gulf War did not take place, did not exist, or that sort of thing, what he's really saying is, let's have a look at what our attitude to war, a terrible, disgusting thing, has become when we can so coldly and coolly see it through the screens that we're familiar with from everything else. We have become divorced from seeing our fellow humans as humans and having a connection with them. We see everything in terms of war games. And that means that we can feel like there isn't blood on our hands when things like this happen. There isn't blood on our hands when we see, that is his mega point that he's making there. He's not literally saying the Gulf War did not happen. And he's
I know. But he's saying that the rather than taking up the Gulf War as an historical moment, which might change the global balance of power, or even more importantly, lead to a development of democracy and I'll just dare to say it, in socialism, rather than those kinds of opportunities opening up, or at least, or even being present, that in the case of the Gulf War, there was no opportunity for change or for the reality of the war to be taken up as as an historical development, but rather it was
Okay, but
merely
by writing his books, what he's saying is wake up and see, and he, that's what he's saying. He's saying
Mhm.
if you see these wars through your computer screens, and if you discuss them through your computer screens in the cold bloodless language of computers, then see what's being done in your name and see how deep it goes. And it's not enough. You have to, when
I think it was the television screen, wasn't it, in 1991, more than the computer screen, because it was all on cable. It wasn't really all on the internet yet.
Well, I have
in
to say,
1991.
he is, who knows how, a clever guy who in
Mhm.
the 70s was talking about cloning computers, connected worlds where people talk to each other all the time through screens. And I don't think he was just limited by saying it's on cable TV. I think he had, he could see a wider picture about what it was. But anyway, we've gone away from the topic.
Let's talk about Hustlers, but let me see if I can do a segue here. And by the way, for the people watching, I want you to know that I understand that when I get on the stream and just start giving my opinions about a movie I saw, it might be a little irritating to you. And I know that my task normally is to talk about, the history of socialism, and to interview people who know more than I do. So I'm, bear with me. I'm trying not to be and take my own opinions as gospel here. But the movie Hustlers, I feel like we should say two things about it. One, it is a refutation of the flattened Starship Troopers type style sexuality in Booksmart. Because sexual difference is very key to the plot of Hustlers. And it also, by being a refutation of Booksmart, it also may point to Baudrillard's perhaps conservative understanding of sexuality and seduction. So I want you to go from there. Maybe you can tell me again what Baudrillard's theory of sexual difference or gender difference is, and how seduction plays such a crucial role in Baudrillard's understanding of that.
I will attempt to do that. But first, I will
Okay.
say, I just want to say for people who may not have seen Hustlers, firstly, it's based on a true story. It's about strippers at a club called Scores in New York at the time of the economic crisis in, when is it, 2008, before and after that. It's about how a bunch of working class, often immigrant women there, in seeing a massive reduction in their salaries or the tips they were getting, because the people that they were dancing for are all people who worked on Wall Street, through a combination of events, and this is a true story, decided what they were going to do instead is just fleece these guys by spiking their drinks and not even necessarily doing any more lap dances for them at all, but simply getting their credit cards. And there's a tremendous joy and energy in this film in many ways. It stars the fantastic Jennifer Lopez, and it's about a different sort of female sexuality, which is one that is very different from male sexuality. And you said to me before we came on the stream, you said, and I in fact would love to see this film. You said this film could not be the other way around. It would not be possible to make a film which was about a bunch of male strippers who then decided that they were going to drug a lot of female clients who came and lavishly spent on them. It just wouldn't work, or it would only work as a Will Ferrell vehicle. And as I also said to you, Will Ferrell actually produced Hustlers, but that would be a different film, be played for laughs instead of this, which is played quite straight, and it is a true story. So what Baudrillard says is he says heterosexuality is, of course, a myth, but it's been a pleasurable myth. Perhaps not all the time and not for everybody. And he says it's based on difference. It's based on men, their stupid erections, which he calls clown-like appendages, which are innately hilarious. And it is about them being very much more interested in women than, it's not to say that women are not interested in them, but it is to say that women can play with them in a way that men cannot seem to play with women. But what he says it's untrue and a fantasy. And at the root of a lot of the problems of heterosexuality is the morning after, men and women wake up and think, really? That a fantasy is created. We get carried away. A man might pursue a woman. All sorts of things might happen. But the next morning, the male desire itself is ridiculous. Or not even the next morning. The moment afterwards, that desire itself is ridiculous. But nevertheless, the story's been spun between people, which they're forced to then sort of corroborate and build something on going forward. But anyway, what he says is this is gossamer thin and really nothing at all. Nevertheless, it was fun and pleasurable because it was about difference, because it was about something which is good, which is an encounter with something that's different from you. So, for example, what he would say about the culture that we live in now is it's a culture of sameness, that we never meet something truly different. We pretend that we meet something truly different. We pretend that we meet this gender, this gender, all sorts of different genders. But in fact, they're all just the same. They behave just the same. They just come in different colors, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And what he says is that it is not that there is a male sexuality and a female sexuality. He says there is only a male sexuality, and it's a very capitalistic one. It's based on production. It's about being a consumer. It's about going and getting things. It's exactly the template of capitalism applied to human beings also. And the answer for a liberated person with a female body or woman or however I'm talking in very old-fashioned language here. You have to, I'm sorry, but forgive me for not fully. But what I'm trying to say here, and I'll use the shorthand of men and women, it's not as simple as that. I absolutely know that. However, what he would say is the power of women is not that they match their own desire and need. He says that in the recent years, there's been a big focus on orgasms, on women must come. It used to be in the past that women didn't come, or they were diffident, and mysterious doctors had to help women with their orgasms.
I always bring a doctor along, on a date, just to make sure
good
that my partner is satisfied. I want to. He has one of those little mirrors on his hat and everything.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And then a visit to Dr. Freud afterwards. But what he says has happened to us post-war is a tremendous. The woman must come, and he's got quite hilarious bits about this in his book Seduction. The woman must come, and there's something wrong with her. If she doesn't, she must learn how to produce her orgasm, and it must very much be a mirror to what the man's orgasm is. A man's orgasm, correct me if I'm wrong here, Doug, is stuff comes out of his penis, and then that's it. And women must also have a moment.
It's not just any old stuff. It isn't cheese whiz. If that happened, you really need to get that doctor.
Emerge from the majestic man. And so anyway, the same must come. The woman must come. It must be a clear moment. And also, you'll forgive me here, I know that you're quite dainty and prim, but in recent years it's got even worse, which is the woman also, sometimes it would seem to me, has to squirt, has to produce something herself also. I'm so sorry to have offended you and anybody
else.
There's
a fine if you don't. If there's a sexual encounter and the woman does not squirt, there is a fine. That is,
because he says a problem that men have had. Men are very vulnerable, he says, and one of the reasons is it's very obvious when they've come. Not always, Doug. I'm sure there are ways of, I don't know, getting the old yogurt in the pocket. I'm not sure. I'll
we should watch the chat here. Is like we're getting comments like Jesus.
Sorry, it's
too TMI.
Okay.
Not squirting. We can look at the milliliters norm for age. Okay. Anyway, I just think it's funny to watch the.
Something. I don't even know how to look at the comments. I'm not a professional.
That's good. No, it's good that you don't need to. You don't need to listen. No, I'm not going to say that.
I feel like it would inhibit me. It would inhibit me.
And it would inhibit you. I don't want you inhibited.
Okay, I'm going too far for your.
But okay.
What I want to say is, men. So it's obvious if a man's had pleasure, it's obvious. It's not obvious if a woman's had pleasure. It can be obvious, but there's always a seed of doubt. In the same way, it's always obvious the child comes from the woman. Mm-hmm. It's kind of obvious if it came from the man too, not always. That's so. What he's saying all the time is it's not the same. Men and women, it's not the same. Men, it's a more clear visible, proof-ridden thing. And a problem that men have with women is it's not so clear. It's not so clear. And he says that, that is the power for women, a power which he then translates into, if we're going to look at the whole of capitalism, he says, just to really summarize it very quickly indeed, he says, perhaps it never was that men were less powerful, were more powerful than women. Perhaps it always was that women were more powerful than men, and perhaps everything was men trying to compensate for that, including by making women forget that. And he says and then including in the end affording women the privilege of their own liberation when when they already, he says, what he says is we live in a more sexist and more racist also time than in the past, because these freedoms and privileges are handed out to people. And he says you can always tell when something is wrong because it's always done in the spirit of compassion and commiseration. When you're handing out booby prizes to people, including, hey, you can be liberated just like us, you can have jobs just like us, you can come just like us, you can have your orgasm, he says you should be very suspicious indeed, and that all the power comes from it not being so clear. It's not there's this and there's this, it's there's this and then there's something that, so he says it's not about the man and the woman, it's about the woman plays with the man rather than sits in opposition to what the man is. And he says that also is a path of liberation for us if we want liberation from capitalism, because it's a path of liberation that is about saying it doesn't have to be this way, there are other ways. I'm not necessarily going to spell them out to you, but I'm going to hint and suggest, let us play more. And instead of having to put everything down into these kind of opposition here, instead don't pin it down and play with it more and upturn it that way. I'm sorry, I'm not altogether coherent.
Well, no, I listen, I think I understand what you're saying. And I this is now I'm going to jump over to discuss
Hustlers.
Taylor's. No, the Hustlers film is perfect. We've said enough about it. The point of it is that the women in Hustlers have a kind of power over the men that you could not find if the roles were reversed.
And also these people
and
are
the power is based on their,
and they'll do anything for these women. They these giants of capitalism, all they want in the end is to go down to scores, forget their whole life, spend $10,000 on lap dances. That's the path of that's what it's all about.
Right. I mean, it's obvious in the movie that this power of being the object certainly has its limits, right? I mean, the characters end up in jail. Also, they're struggling throughout, and the reason they're there is because there's a class story behind that. But I want to ask you about let's take up this idea that women have power because they are desirable. Okay, this is what I think you're saying. The way in which men desire them gives women a power over men, heterosexual men, that or if you're not talking about heterosexual men, maybe it's reproduced between gay men. There's one who is a desired one and one who's a desirer. I don't know. I would guess that, but that's maybe me projecting. But I want to ask you, you're a white woman. Taylor Swift, why is she so popular? Is it with the let's say 35 to 55-year-old white women set? And is it because she embodies this particularly feminine kind of power?
No, it isn't. I think a lot of Taylor Swift leaves me very cold, but I can nevertheless see it's amazing. And I think that some of her videos are absolutely amazing. I think she has done a lot of data-driven research in terms of what her lyrics are about. And I think she speaks very much to young women, teenagers, and she speaks a story
and
to them
their moms about
empowerment. But I think what she is and embodies is something that Baudrillard would call cold seduction. So what that is
and I want to show this on the screen. You keep talking, but I'm gonna put this on the screen at the same time. So go, here she is, Taylor Swift, with her cold seduction. Go ahead.
With her cold seduction, look at her. Well, firstly, it's totally hyperreal. She's gorgeous. Everything is heightened. She's got amazing outfits on. None of it makes any sense at all, but who cares when she's doing all her stuff? She's being the girl boss, which is what we're told is so fantastic, being the subject, doing all the stuff with her bossettes or whoever all these people are. But at the same time, she's talking about very, heartfelt teenage stuff that we can all hear. She is talking about the power of women, but she is doing it in a cold way. And she's doing it she's doing it in a corporate way, I would say. She's not talking about, the real, as it would seem to me, power of women, which is a power of not pinning it down. She's pinning it down very clearly indeed. She's giving she's giving good messages and lessons about how things are, but she's doing it because she's done a lot of research, and she's doing it as an advert. The advert is for her own career. What I feel about Taylor Swift is a lot of it comes, and it's very brilliantly done. I'm saying nothing new here. A lot of it comes from spite, feelings of anger, and that we can all relate to. And here at last, somebody able to actually, but I tell you what, I would contrast her with is Alanis Morissette.
I was just going to say,
so, Alanis Morissette is not hyperreal like Taylor Swift is. She's rawer, more messy, more laughable, more ridiculous. Taylor Swift would never write a sappy song like Isn't It Ironic and not even be able to define what ironic is. But she's more human. She's not just one message endlessly branded that Taylor Swift is. But again, it goes back to a discussion of what hyperreal things are and why they're good. They're good, or they're not good, but they work because they're very effectively pared down. When you totally simplify your message and are very on brand all the time, it packs a heightened punch. But
well, no, the Alanis Morissette song that reminds me of this, the song that that music video clip was from is You Ought to Know. Yeah. Which is all about a breakup, and she's singing to the man who left her. It turns out to have been an actor on the TV show Full House. But in any case, she's singing at him about how much pain he's caused her and how dishonest he was, and saying kind of ironically, I hope you find someone as good as I am, and I'm sure you'll be happy, and I hope you give her a child and all that. But you can feel her pain in that. But I have a hard time. All there is from the Taylor Swift song that I heard, and I've only heard it once, is like a desire for vengeance, and not on any particular man, but just on a whole lot. I get the feeling there's a list of exes that she would like to spite, which is, probably appealing. But anyhow,
we can all see the appeal of that, Doug. From time to time. But to answer your question, no, I don't think that she's embodying the real power of what it is to be a woman, to use the shorthand of woman there. I don't. I think she is doing it in a cold way. I think that she is using herself, and I think she's using the issues of the day. And I feel sure that she and her team do a lot of data research, and they're putting it together for those reasons. I feel that but nevertheless, I feel that she's a unique and very powerful artist. But I don't think that it's still about victimization. And I look for what I never see anywhere is women who, well, the one place I see it is in Cardi B. I'm a big fan of Cardi B's, particularly. I like her song Up. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Doug, but that's a song that's about not being the victim, and it's about it's called Up, I think, because it has a line in it where she says, when it's up, it's up. And I think that refers to what I was telling you before about a problem that men have, which is
what is she talking about when she says when it's up, it's up? Explain that to me. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
You're a grown man. You don't need to. You can get your kicks other ways.
All right, fine. Well, listen, we've been talking for just about an hour. I like Cardi B. You have not.
I'm going to have a look at the comments later. I hope everybody's okay, Doug. I hope it was okay.
I think there are a few people who fainted, but otherwise, I think it all went well. In the second half, the gloves are coming off. We're going to talk about Debord and Baudrillard again. about. Also, I guess you have things to say about Jeffrey Epstein. This is a topic that I am
you told me
afraid
you should
of.
do it in the parent room, and you're right, I think, to say that.
Yeah. So people can join us for a second hour. In about 20 minutes, we'll start that second hour in the parrot room. Susie, you're always welcome to come back, and I enjoy it. We could talk about something other than Baudrillard, but probably not about something other than sex. But we will because
Marxism. Let's talk about Marxism.
Because that's the Freudian in me saying that, because everyone is always talking about sex, even when they're not.
Well, or not. That's another thing that Baudrillard says. He also says it's never too late to go beyond Marx and Freud.
That last bit, now gulag for him. All right, listen, we'll see you guys in the parrot room, and thanks for watching.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout,